Hello everyone, how are you guys doing? I hope everything is okay and you're doing well, and also I hope you went through the last example and kind of have a good understanding about how this local configuration server work. And I got few questions and I answer all of those. I hope you guys solve all those things, and just as a reminder, the last project is on the GitHub, so you can take it and you can try it if your project didn't work, and you can compare with mine and you can get it work. So today we are going to go one more step, which is we are going to host this configuration on a GitHub, right? So far configuration is two, right? Keep in mind. So configuration server is one part, configuration store is the other part, right? So configuration store, so far we did with a local, but now today we are going to learn how to deploy this into the GitHub. So we discussed the advantages last time, right? So deploying the configuration on the GitHub, we discussed those advantages last time. So today we are going to directly jump into the course. So but before that, I have to tell one thing. If you're not subscribed yet, so this is the right time to subscribe. You know why? Because subscribe to this channel won't cost you anything, right? It doesn't cost you anything, but it give you a lot of things. For example, so this course, so you won't miss any videos of this course, and also you won't miss really good few vlogs in this channel too. So if you happen to watch this video, if you are nothing to do with this software development, but it's fine, just go ahead and subscribe because I have something for you as well. So how today program going to work? So today we are going to learn how we can host this configuration store on a GitHub. But same time, keep in mind you can use the SVN if you want, you can use any other repository if you want, but I'm going to talk about GitHub. So to make it easy and not to waste your time, what I have done is I created few configuration files what we are going to do today, and I already deployed to our repository, right? So repository link will be below, so you can download those two to I mean you can have your own configuration files, but if you lazy to do, and if you think it's good to have my configuration files, so you can download this from the GitHub. In fact, I'm going to do the same, right? So let's come here. First I'm going to set up my environment. I'm going to pull my configuration from GitHub. So when you go to repository, right, so you have this microservice course on YouTube repository, right? So there you have a configuration store, right? So one is primary config store and another one is a summer config store. I'll tell you what this is. So what I'm going to do is I need to clone this repository. Okay, so I'm going to clone this here. Okay, good. And then if you go inside that, so you can see I have this configuration store, right? So I don't need this. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create new repository, right? So in my GitHub, I'm going to create new repository, right? So this is how it's going to work. Configuration server you can run anywhere, right? Remember, it's a two-part, configuration server and the configuration store. So configuration server you may run on AWS. In this case, it's going to run on my local machine. But configuration store, real configuration, we are going to store on the GitHub. So for that, I'm going to create a repository here. You can use my repository, but I would recommend you to go and create your own repository, because if I purge this repository in future, your program would still work, right? So what I'm going to do is Spring Cloud config store, right? So you can give any name. I'm just giving this to give it to make sense, right? So I'm going to create this repository. I don't need any readme file or something, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, done. So now I'm going to clone this repository as well, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone this repository here. Okay, right. So now I have two repositories. Now I'm going to move my configuration to this repository. So I mean my configuration means the configuration which I pull to my usual GitHub repository which I host for this course. I'm going to clone those files from here to my configuration store repository. From here, configs, I think I created, what is my file? Primary config store. So primary config store, everything I want to copy into Spring Cloud config store. Okay, so now I'm going to Spring Cloud config store. If I check, okay, good, I have a few files, right? So if I check the status, I can see I added few files. So I'm going to add all and add all files and git commit with initial. So I'm going to push this to master. So I don't have a master branch yet, but this will create the master branch and push it. Right. So now you can see if I refresh this, so I have a master branch and I have a few configurations. Okay. So this is what my plan. So assume these are three different services, right? So member service, membership service. So last time we learned, if you remember, property file should be named as a property file name hyphen, service name or application name hyphen and then your profile, right? So in this case, this is what my service looks like. I name this directory in a different name to make sure you don't misunderstand. The directory name also should be in the same name as a service name. There is no rule like that, right? But when you do it in the production environment, it's always better to name the directory from the service name, then it's readable, right? But in this case, I use the two different names to make sure you don't get confused, right? So then I can have three services, and this one I use to show as my default configuration, right? Okay, so this is how it works. So now what I am going to do is I am going to create a project for this one. I am not going to use the last project, but I am going to create a new one. So in this case, I am going to give the name if you remember last time we got actuator and config server. Okay, so now I have my service running. So if you remember, right, so just to recap, so if you go here, so you will see we have added configuration server and also actuator endpoints, right? So now we have to go here and we need to tell this is configuration server. Okay, so we are good technically. Now this is my configuration server, but I need to set up few configurations here. First, I'm going to change this to YAML. So first, I need to tell this has to run on a port 8191. So that is the port we used for our configurations. And also I need to tell here Spring Cloud config server git URI, right? So what is my git repository for this configuration store? So that is this one, right? So this is my store. So I'm going to copy this URL and paste it here, right? So it's good now. And in this case, my repository is a public repository. In case if you are using a private repository, so you have a username and a password here also, right? So if you can give you some username and the password, right? So if you happen to use some private repositories, right? So in this case, I don't have it, so I'm not going to give those, right? So this is my private repository. So technically, I'm done. I have a configuration server running, and also I have a configuration store, right? So, but I need to point your attention to one thing. This is how it's work, right? So if you check this one, right? So you can see three different services, right? So and you have a application.yaml, which is a default configuration file and a generic file, right? So last time we learned if you want to invoke configurations, you need to give the service name / profile name. Okay, but in this case, in the same directory, you have a multiple profiles, right? So you have a dev, you have a prod, you have a QA, and also you have a service default, right? So this configuration file I used as a default settings for that particular service. This one, this one I use global default configuration file. You don't have to use that, but that's how I configured this. So this is how it works, right? So if you take this structure, this is how my file structure, right? I have services and I have multiple profile for each service and I have a default file. So usually you have to call this saying service name / profile name. If you want, you can give a tag. Tag would be a branch or a commit or commit ID or something like that, right? But that is optional, right? That's what I use a square bracket here. Right. So if you call this like a membership / default. So default means no profile. That means the default profile. Then it will return this membership.yaml because that is the default configuration. So this is a little bit confusing. So make sure you get it right. So now if I ask membership / default, what it does is it returns you default file for the membership service, mem service, and also then it will return your global configuration file. If I ask membership / prod, what it does is it take exact profile membership / prod.yaml, it will take that profile, and also it will take membership.yaml, which is a global configuration for that service, and also the application.yaml, which is a global configuration, right? If you call something like a reporting.perf, in that case I don't have a profile like that. So, but still it will return to me reporting default file. Why? Because I don't have exact profile to match, and also it will return a global application.yaml. And if I ask something called account / prod, right? Prod multiple profiles exist, but there is nothing called account service. I don't have a profile for account service. In that case, it will only return application.yaml, which is the global file, right? So that is how it works, right? So now what I am going to do is, in my case, I am going to run this, right? If in case your repository wrong or something, you will see immediately, because you will get some message saying I cannot hit to this repository. Okay, so I get an error message saying address is already in use. Okay, so maybe my last program is still running. So let me to see. So maybe something is running in my machine. We'll see what's running. Okay, I can see I have this one is running. So I think I'm good now. So I can run this again. Okay, so this time it worked, right? So now I killed my whatever the service already was running. So I killed my port. So now here, this is last time what we tried, right? So in this time we have a different services, right? So I have a member service, membership service. It's a membership service, right? It's a membership / default, right? So you will see now I get membership one file. Okay, so read this configuration. Okay, so this is a little bit tricky. So now I am going to call prod. Still same, right? So dev, still same. So now I am going to create a call for different services. Still same. So no matter what we call, we get the same default configuration. Looks like something is wrong. Here's the problem, right? So in my service, I'm going to stop this for now. In my service, I'm telling this repository, go and search this repository. But I'm not telling to go into the subdirectories within that repository. So what I need to do is, I need to tell search path. Okay. So search path is a array, right. So you can see, so if you take my repository pattern, so you can see every service, every directory end with a service. So what we can do is, we can tell anything, start with anything but end with a service. If there are directories like this, go and search in those directories, right. So I am going to run it again. Okay, it's running. So here I am going to call this again reporting.dev. Here you go. So now you can see I call for dev, right, reporting service dev profile. So I get reporting dev, which is the exact match, and also reporting service, reporting YAML. So why reporting YAML? Because this is the default profile for that service, and also this is the global one, which is application.yaml, right. So if I call membership, right, so you will see now I get again 3 membership dev. So let us say membership prod, right. So I get membership prod, and also this is the default profile for the membership service, and also this is the global profile, right. So let us call some profile does not exist, ABC. So in that case you get 2, because the default profile for the service and also global profile, right. So if I call something, some service does not exist, let us say Krish service. So now you get only 1, which is the global one, right. So go back in this video. So remember that pattern I shown you. So whenever you call, so it has a way to get the file. So for example, if you give the exact match, it will get it. If you don't have exact match, but if you find the service, it will get the service default file and also the global file. If you don't have that service match, then it will go for the default file. Also there is a opportunity like this, right. Let us say something like this, membership, right, hyphen prod dot YML, right. So you can get that exact property file back as a response. So you can see this now response is different. So now what happens is, it get exact one-to-one property file from this exact match. Now it doesn't give you the service default file or global file, it just give you exact file. But if you need to see this as a property file, because we configured as a YAML, right, we store this as a YAML, right. If you go here, membership member service, right, so this is stored as a YAML. But if you want to see this as a properties file, you can get as a properties files as well. Not only that, if you want to see this as a JSON file, you can do that too, right. So this is just a JSON, right. So what happened here is, we get exact file from the service, right. But what we did before is, we give the service and the profile, and based on that it take the values. So what you need to understand is, so when you give the service name is taking from Spring application dot name. That is the one it automatically discovered to call this configuration. And also you can give Spring profile active. What is the active profile in your service for the service? Then these are the 2 values it's going to use to fetch this automatically from configuration service. However, you can see here I have hard coded this prod profile, right, doesn't make any sense. Then how I can deploy this into the dev environment, because then the profile is hard coded. So when you do in the real production, we don't hard code the profile. What we do is, when you start the Docker or when you start the service, we call this Spring profile active as an environment variable, right. So then it can read that environment variable and then kick off the service, and then service will use that value into fetch the real configuration, right. I am going to show you this, don't worry, right. I am going to show you this in the real world example. Okay, if you remember, I explained 3 parts of this URL, right. So if you come here, you can see service name / profile name / the tag. So tag means is nothing but you can use a version, right. For example, let us say you want to use the previous versions of your configuration or older version of your configuration. That is the advantage of being using a GIT, right. So if you are using the local file system, you can do that, because there is no way you can versioning it unless you use some version control system in local, right. But when you go to GIT, you can do this, because you have a commit. So, what I am going to do here to show this to you, so I am going to go to member service, right. So, I am going to modify one file, let us say a prod file, and I am going to change this duration to not the all, but winter, right. So, then I am going to add this file and commit. Right. So, if you check here now we have two commits, right. So, there is a new commit, right. So, update commit, if you go here you will see one value updated to the winter, right. So, now what I am going to do is I am going to take this commit hash, right. So, I am going to take this commit hash, and from here, so now if I call membership slash prod, right, did I stop this? No, right, it's working. So, you will see it comes as a all, and here it comes as a winter, exact prod match comes as a winter, right. So, what I am going to do is slash this one, which is my previous commit, right. So, now you will see this comes also as a all. Why? Because this is calling from the previous tag. So, that is the way this label is used, right. So, certain documents shows this as a syntax in the label, right, but really we can use any tag name here, or even you can use a branch name. If you have any branch, you can use a branch name, but in our case we do not have a branch, right. So, if you call, let us say dev branch or something like that, so it will not work because we do not have it. Okay. So, if you call directly, it will give you the winter. If you call with the tag or the hash value for the previous commit, it will give you the previous commit. And there are multiple other things we can do here. For example, so you can add other repos here, right. So, you can give a repos and you can give multiple repos, right. So, how that works is, let us say you want to give a special discount on a summer time or something, or you want to run a special configuration on a performance environment, or if you want to run some configuration on a staging environment. So, what you can do is you can copy this entire thing into a new repository, different repository, and you can give that configuration here, right. So, in that case, when you call from here, right, let us say membership, instead of the prod you can say, hey, I am run on a stage 1 server, right. So, in that case it will pull those configurations from the stage 1 server, then again you can use your profile and so far so forth. So, you can just search a little bit on the internet and you can figure it out, but I am not going to cover it here because it is a very simple something to learn, since now you know the basic concept of hosting to JIT and recalling it. Now, the problem is this, though we did this though we called this configuration like this is not how this exactly work in the real world, right, because the real world we do not call this REST endpoint to get the configuration. This has to happen automatically to our services, right. So, let me to show you that how that works. Okay. So, what I am going to do is I am going to create a new service, right. I am going to create a new service which consume these configurations, right. For now, I am going to stop this and I am going to create a new project. For now, I am going to name this as a config consumer, right, and for this I am going to use web and also configuration client, right. So, these are the two dependencies I am going to use. Config consumer, this name is okay for me, and I am going to open this in a new window. Okay. I am going to show you one thing. Okay, I am going to give config URI here, right, Spring Cloud config URI. I am going to give HTTP localhost, because I am running this project localhost 8191. This is the same URL of your configuration server, right, what we created while ago. So, now what I am going to do is I am going to start the configuration server. I think I made a mistake, I did not comment it. Okay, so now let us run again. Okay, so cool, it is working. So, now I am going to run this. So, when I run this, you will see it is still trying to fetch the configuration from localhost 8888. So, that is the default port for a configuration server by default. If you not specify any port when you create a configuration server, this is the port it takes by default, 8888, right? But in our case, we run the configuration server on 8191. I did that for purpose to teach you this one, right? Because if I use the 8888, I can teach you this one. So here what happens is when the Spring service starts, right? So before it reach the application.yaml file, before it process it, what happens is configuration server it going, because since I have a configuration client dependence in my project, it trying to pull the configuration. So it says, okay, I don't have a specified any configuration URI. So what it's going to do is it's going to pull it from the default URI. So why? Because configuration has to fetch before it processes the application.yaml file. So the solution is we need to create a file called bootstrap.yaml. And we put this configuration over here. Now see what happened. See here, it's trying to fetch from 8888. See what happened when I run this time. So now it correctly pull configuration from 8191 my localhost, right? So I get some errors, forget about it, but so now you get the point, right? So if you put configuration URI in the application.yaml, it won't work. Why? Because configuration of fetch before it processes the application.yaml file. So now we'll see what is my problem here. It says Tomcat configuration 8191 is failed to start, port is already used. Okay, all right. What's happening here? This is also a really interesting issue, right? So in our case, we don't specify any port this service to run. That means it has to run on a port 8080, right? But it is not, right? So let's try to see specifying the port 8080. I have a theory why this problem comes. We'll see, but so run this. I don't think this would work. It's not working, right? It is not working because of one problem, right? So let's delete this. So what happened here? So now this is the time you need to import to read the logs. So now it's fetching the configuration from 8191, right? So we didn't specify any profile, so it's going to fetch profile from the default profile, right? The default one. In the default profile, if you go back and check here, right? Configuration store, in the default profile, we remember we get the default profile as well as a global profile, which is application.yaml. In the application.yaml, we specify the port as a 8191, right? So what happens here? So service starts, it fetch the configuration and it override existing configuration from that one, right? So it's override the existing configuration from the configuration what coming from the configuration server. So configuration server tells, hey, your port is 8191. So what it's going to do is it override port 8080 to 8191 and try to start, but it can't start because why? 8191 is already reserved by our configuration server. So what we can do is I'm going to alter this file and I'm going to delete this. Actually this configuration is harmless, but I'm going to remove this as well. Okay, so in a default file I don't have any configuration right now. I think now it should work. So let's try to run again. So now even though it's fetched the configuration, the default configuration application YAML doesn't have any configuration to override, so it would be fine. Yeah, it worked, right? It fine. Then now service run. Okay, so that is one thing to learn. So now anyway we experience and by example, so now it fetching the configuration from our config server which is hosted on the GIT. So let's try to consume this configuration. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a new package called model, and there I'm going to create a new class called member profile configuration. Okay. So, I am going to create this as a component, which mean when you put the component annotation, we learn it create a bean for us, right. So, I am going to auto wire environment here. So, when you take the environment, make sure you get a Spring Core environment. So, there are multiple environments here. So, get the Spring Core environment, and then I am going to create a few. So, I am going to create a method here, public. Okay. So, now I am going to add a controller here. Profile controller, and I am going to annotate this with the REST controller annotation. Okay. And then I need to have a method here. I can auto wire my configuration here, member profile configuration. Okay, and then I am going to create a method. Okay. So, entire member configuration I am going to return. Okay. So, that is it, I am done. So, in my case we set the configuration servers and everything is set up. So, I am going to run this again. I think I have a spelling mistake here, I am going to correct it and run again. Okay. So, now I am going to call other one, right. In this case localhost http localhost 8080 profile, because I am going to call my consume service, right, and it tells default model null. That means it did not fetch my values. Let us see what happened. We wired this properly. Oh, we forgot one thing, we did not give my service name, right. So, remember we need to give the service name to fetch the configuration, because that is the one it used to fetch the configuration and the profile, right. So, if the profile is not specified, it is a default profile, but service name must be given. Application.name membership. So, let us run again, okay, and run again. So, now it say crossover, right. So, now it says default model is a crossover, but we only get one property, maybe we made something wrong here. Let us go to member configuration and see what happened. Okay, so Spring, and when you serialize it to JSON, it always use the bean naming convention. So, bean naming convention mean you have to have a getters and setters. So, I missed the get word here, probably that is the reason. So, we will see what happened, and then let us say we call it, yeah, we have now both properties, right. So, not only this, if you want, you can convert this to a, you can fetch this to UI. So, if you want to fetch this to UI, so you need to put a controller here instead of the REST controller, and you can take a model here and M profile. Again I am naming like this to avoid the confusion, because this has nothing to do with the URL and the file name. So, then we are not returning this, and instead of this we are returning a string here. So, now what we need to do is we need to create a web page for this. So, you go here in a template. So, you create new file, you have to match the same name M profile. So, I use the M profile just to make sure you are not confused with the URL request mapping. So, HTML file. So, in the body I am going to use the value which coming from there, right. So, P, and for this I am going to use the theme leaf. So, XML how we return as a you need to put the name whatever coming from here. So, model and the mean. Right, so that's it, and we need to add the theme lift dependency to the POM file. So, what I am going to do is copy this and add it here as Spring Starter. Right. So, I am good. I just going to make sure, just going to re-import all the dependencies. Right, I think I am good. I am going to go back to my controller to verify, to I make this auto wired. Okay, everything is good. Let's rerun this. In meantime, go back to browser, localhost 8080. Profile. So, you will see crossover and 7, right. So, you will see crossover and 7. So, you can format this using a bootstrap and get it more beautiful, but the point I am going to prove here is you can even get the configuration not only as a REST service, anywhere within your service you can access those configurations. So, that is the point I am going to bring here. By the way, how this work is, so what happens is in our service, right. So, we configured this to configuration service. So, what happened here, member configuration class, we inject to the environment, and from the environment we are trying to access vehicle.default.model property, but in my environment I do not have that property, right. What it does is my service is configured to, hey, go and ask configuration from localhost port 8191. So, it goes here, and that configuration server 8191 configuration server is pointed to the GitHub. So, it go and fetch from the GitHub and give this to membership service, and membership service use those as a configuration service configurations to that service, and that is how it come back to this up to the service layer. So, now we learn how we can host how we can create a configuration server in locally, as well as how we can host a configuration on a GitHub. Not only that, how we can consume those configuration to our service. So, that means one big step also completed. So, it was little bit longer video, but I think you are okay because we learned a lot. So, then do not forget to subscribe, that is very important, so you will not miss next video, right. So, do not forget to subscribe right now if you are not subscribed yet. So, if you have an audience who interested in these type of videos, so then please share on your social media, so they will also get access to these videos and they will learn something new. Then I will see you soon on next video. Till that, stay safe, take care.